Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, featuring the sharpest minds in marketing, inspirational case histories, and weekly insights you can apply to your business. Find out why top CMOs rank this podcast among their favorites. Now, here's your host, Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
Hello, Renegade Thinkers. My friend Brian Kramer believes strongly that there is no B2B or B2C, only H to H, as in human to human. In fact, he wrote a book on it. And while I agree that all communications are about connecting with individuals, and there's much that a B2C marketer can teach a B2B marketer about human emotions and so forth, the reality is, with few exceptions, consumers don't shop by committee. But buying committees are a reality for anybody selling into the enterprise. And we know those committees have gotten to 10, 11, 12 people. And as a result, I'm convinced that it requires a different approach to marketing. However, I could be wrong. So part of the reason that my guest today is on the show is that she, as the CMO of Avid, has both B2B and B2C in her target, and that challenges things. By the way, Avid makes a high-end audio, video products, and I went on the website, and there's a large range of these things, and it's gotten into clouds and software and all sorts of things, and it's used by professionals in huge media corporations as well as independent artists. So, Melissa Puls, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Drew. Pleased to be here.
So, before we get into the topic at hand, let's talk about your background as a second-generation female marketer. Tell me about your mom and her career as a marketer.
Yeah, well, thanks for asking, Drew. So back in the 80s, I guess when it wasn't common for women to be senior executives at high-tech companies, my mom was one of the very early employees of Kronos, which is a time and attendance labor management company. And she led marketing for them for many years. And what she was interesting, she kind of, I guess I have marketing in my veins, if you will, because she would come home and talk about challenges she was facing or decisions she was making, and she would ask me for my opinion. And my sister, who ended up being a school teacher, and I always say she could teach a tree how to read, she's amazing, she leaned out to those conversations. She wasn't really very interested. Right. Where I would really lean in, and she would ask me my opinion, and I would give her my thoughts. And it really inspired me to go on and become a professional marketer, if you will. So not only do I admire her for her conviction and being a strong woman who was going to do whatever she set her mind to, but also her creative sense of how it is to be a marketer.
Now, did I notice that you spent some time at Kronos too?
I did. Yes.
So that's not a coincidence.
That is not a coincidence. She was actually departing Kronos as I came in. And my first job there was as a fulfillment coordinator. So they were spending millions of dollars to outsource fulfillment, and they hired me for just a couple bucks to come in and insource that and build a fulfillment center in-house. So, I literally would stuff the packages for inside sales, which I thought was the most important job in the company, by the way.
Of course it was.
And I would take my mail cart down at the end of the day and ship the packages every day. But, it's one of the principles I think my mom gave to me, which is no matter what job you have, you lean into that and make it the best possible position that you could make it. And you'll always shine if you do that.
It's funny. So both of my kids, who are now grown up, interned at Renegade. One of them, my daughter now works at Facebook. So, she's second, but I actually had a grandfather in the advertising business, and my wife is also longtime advertising. So we had a lot of that
Mm-hmm.
in the house, and it does inform a lot of the conversations. And if the kids are paying attention, they go, okay, so what is that? That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah,
You did that
yeah.
campaign for those folks? Oh, that's cool.
Right, right.
So
And I could even see that now with my own children, the difference. And I have a blended family of 5 kids, so that
wow.
lends itself to lots of complexities. But, I could see the ones that are interested and engaged, and the ones that, will probably take a different path. And that's all good,
It's
wherever they
all
want to
good.
go. Yes, exactly.
Exactly. So I'm curious. So your mom, being a professional in the '80s, as a woman, probably had Me Too stories, probably confronted a lot of issues. Do you
Mhm.
find that some of her experience informed some of your approach? Or
Yeah, I think it did in a kind of an interesting way. Uh, so my dad was also a professional man. He was into politics for a short time, but he owned his own insurance agency, and he really encouraged my mom to go out and do whatever she wanted to do. And so she approached it with that mindset, and so did I. And I don't, I hear a lot about. I work with women a lot. It's one of the things I love to do is mentor women in business, and I hear about the challenges that they face in the boardrooms and issues. And it's interesting. It's not that I don't acknowledge that there are differences with how women are treated in the workforce, because I understand that fully. But I have kind of taken the approach where I choose to not acknowledge it, probably because my mom never talked about that. It was
right,
a non-issue. It
right.
was like, we're going to do what we're going to do, and we will be treated as equals no matter what. So, I've really approached it in an interesting way, which is just to say, just assume. That it's like an assumption. I never thought it any other way, which allowed me to kind of be much more open-minded, I think, to, that's a gift that she gave me.
Yeah, it's funny as you're talking and talking about mom, I have to mention, so as I'm doing this podcast, I often think of my mother, who actually had a TV show on a local cable company in Newport Beach in the late 60s, early 70s.
Hmm.
And so here we are. This is the equivalent of local cable on Renegade Thinkers Unite. All right.
Right,
So
right. How
so
full circle.
exactly. Thanks, Mom. Anyway, I'm before your career at Avid. Before that, you had multiple CMO roles. Is there something that when you look back at some of the programs that you did or anything that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be proud of. A lot also hard lessons learned, as you could imagine.
Sure.
But I think one of the moments, I guess, you look back in your career and you have moments in time that you remember and that shape you. And I think one of the moments was when I was working for a company called SSA Global, which was a $700 million enterprise application software company. And it was a public company. I had taken the company public, and a company called Infor acquired SSA. And
Hmm.
Infor at the time was the same exact size company,
Right.
and they were privately held. So Infor acquired SSA, same size companies, so we all thought we knew it all, right? And the approach the leadership team took at Infor was to bring everyone, all the key leaders of both companies, to Arizona in the middle of the summer.
Fun. Fun.
Lock us up for 2 weeks, and break down the two companies and build one back up. It was like
Wow.
a real world MBA. And and was also a game of Survivor, quite frankly.
Yeah.
That, at the end of every day, someone was getting a tap on the shoulder saying, thanks, but no thanks. And what I learned, the big lesson that I learned through that experience, is that change is inevitable, especially in high tech. And the best thing you can do is to be open minded, be around a table, leave everything else, the files of information that are in your head, let them go, and be open minded to what's sitting right in front of you. And I approached that. I was actually in my, geez, I think I was just 30, so I was pretty young at the time, and influential probably. But I had this instinct that said, I'm not going to be protective of my budget or protective of my team. When I'm going to come in and be open-minded to the possibilities for everybody. And by the end of that 2 weeks, as it was a game of Survivor, and I was looking around saying, okay, I didn't even really realize it at the time because I was just so into the moment of building up this one company. And at the end of the 2 weeks, they ended up asking me to be the vice president of marketing for them. And it was just because of that open-minded, the willingness to look, think differently, be open to change, and be about the solution, not living in, the files of the past. And that's something I've carried with me really throughout my career.
Interesting. I have this vision in this room that every day a few chairs were removed.
Yes, 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 it was very much like that.
Oh God! And if you got tapped, I don't know if that would have been a good thing or a bad thing. Anyway.
Yeah, but you know what? I also believe that everything happens for a reason. So a lot of the people that didn't end up, staying with the company end up having awesome careers elsewhere. So, everything happens for a reason.
Oh, it does. So as we wrap up this section, I'm just curious because you've had these sort of intense, but relatively short periods at Optinex, and I probably said the name wrong, and Progress. With those short periods, you have to really hit the ground running on those things. Do you have like a 100-day playbook that you use?
Well, I think it's seek to understand and then to be understood. That's the first principle. Optinex was an interesting thing because that is a company that's owned by Francisco Partners, and it's a small $20 million-ish security company, and they needed an interim CMO to kind of put in some best practices for them. So that was a really cool gig for me. I was working for a private equity. I came in, and it was more like a consulting role, really, identifying the issues, figuring out what the challenges were, giving them a playbook that they could then, and then I helped to hire the CMO, the permanent CMO, who's an awesome guy. So that was a really, really interesting and unique, almost testing out my future in marketing consulting as I move forward at someday. But so that was really putting in that kind of understanding. With Progress, I was there almost 3 years at Progress, did my stint there, and the most interesting thing that happened at Progress was we acquired a company called Telerik. And Progress is a 30-year-old software company that has been in the business, has a lot of legacy customers. And Telerik, and the average tenure of folks at Progress is 20 years. You look around, there's a lot of 20-year people there who are just awesome talent. And then Telerik, which was a Bulgarian-based company.
Wow.
Yes, that was an application app developer tools company. Their CEOs were in their 20s. A lot of young, up-and-coming kind of superstar talent. And what was so cool about that was bringing those two companies together again with one common identity. And
2 weeks in Arizona with them?
Not 2 weeks. Arizona. No, this was this one was not a fire drill. This was a very thoughtful process of understanding the differences between the two companies and then relating those two together and building a brand that's really unified. So, every situation I find is a little bit different, but there's principles you put in place. Like I said, seek to understand and then to be understood. Always be looking out for measurements and metrics to see how marketing can really impact performance, which is without that, I got to be able to look in the eyes of my CFO and tell them that we're getting a return on investment. So we, got to start there. And then, really understanding how to build the talent that you need in a team to be hugely successful. So, there's always principles you put in place, but every situation is unique.
Got it. All right. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Avid.
Great, Drew. Thanks.
Did you know that Renegade Thinkers Unite was ranked number 2 of the top 10 podcasts for CMOs by Crackerjack Marketing? Wow, we're really honored. Now, we couldn't do that without amazing guests, and we've had some amazing CMOs on this show, and also terrific listeners like you all. If you like what we do here, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player. That way, you'll never miss an episode. Also, as a special thanks, I'd like to send you a free ebook on renegade thinkers. Now for that, just email drew@renegade.com. Now let's get back to the show. Okay, we're back. My guest is Melissa Puls, and we've been talking about the key principles of marketing leadership. And I love your quick list of seek to understand, get your metrics in place, and build the team. It's sort of funny. It somewhat follows the principles of good to great, and there it's build the team, set the vision, and then put some metrics in place. Yep. Anyway, as long as the top three are there, you're good.
That's right. They're in there somewhere.
So let's talk about Avid for a second. You've been there now over a year. What attracted you to this role to begin with?
Yeah. So great question. I feel like it's kind of come full circle. My first day of college, I remember I was, my professor, one of my communications professors said to me, all of us, you had to stand up and say what you wanted to do in communications. And I said, I want to go to Hollywood, and I want to be talent, and I want to work in production. And I was, very, if you think I talk fast and have a high voice now, you should have heard me at 18. And he kind of squashed my dream and said, sit down, lower your octave by your voice by about 100, get rid of that Boston accent. And you might want to go in another direction.
Yeah. How about behind the camera,
Exactly. But I always had a passion for the media and entertainment industry, I guess is my point. I sort of took a path into high tech, going from, always working in large high-tech companies. So when I saw the opportunity to have the worlds collide of getting, really back into media and entertainment, it was a really fun and exciting industry to be a part of. The technology aspects, which I really love the understanding how the technology can really make an impact for our customers. And then, Avid is similar to Progress, is a company that's been around a long time and needs an element of reinvigoration and new energy and new, really deploying some new practices in marketing so that, we can take this company for another 30 years. So that to me is those elements. And also, the one last thing is the leadership team. To me, it's working with a leadership team that is all in it together. We're in it to win it together. There's no, agendas, no, set notions. It's like everyone working together to make it happen. So for all of those reasons, it just seemed like a perfect fit for my next step in my career.
Awesome. And we've talked a lot. Entire episodes have been simply on the relationship between the CMO and the C-suite. So I have yet to meet a successful CMO who doesn't have a CEO who's fully behind him or her, as well as one who's built relationships with these others. Okay, so here you are. You arrive at Avid. And I'm imagining you sought to understand. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about any strategic observations that you made or changes that you saw needed to be made.
Yeah. So Avid, the media and entertainment industry is the customers that we have expect a high touch marketing engagement, a lot of face-to-face, a lot of, in-person connections, attending the large events, also having local events, which is really important to our industry and needs to continue. But at the same time, not only is my role as a CMO is to take care of and nurture our customers and keep them with us, especially in a subscription SaaS model, but also go out and acquire new customers. So I like to call it, we're the Avid pool, if you will. We have our pool of customers who are loyal, and we need to make sure they stay with us and feel connected. But there's also this ocean out there of where Avid, as we deliver new products to market, that we can go out and acquire net new customers. So we had to deploy a balanced approach between being face-to-face and engaging with our customers, but also having a digital first, content driven, scalable, personalized approach to generating net new customers. So the challenge that I face and our team is now facing is within this, same budget, same realm of a budget, how do you go out and continue to have the face-to-face engagement while transitioning to a digital content-driven approach to attract new customers? So that's really our, and ultimately getting the best return on investment for every dollar we spend, so I can have those great relationships with the CFO and the CEO and others. So
Let me
that's
ask
our
you a
unique
question.
challenge. Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things that is interesting to me is the way marketers often are faced with budgets.
Mm-hmm.
So you say you have a fixed budget. Why? I mean, if
Well,
you could prove that marketing drove
yes,
more revenue, why
right.
wouldn't you get more money?
Well, but you have to prove that first, right? So my challenge or my opportunity or our opportunity as a marketing team is to, because when you're doing a more face-to-face event type of approach, it's a lot of influence, but you can't necessarily be able to show the pure ROI from that. How you get the return on investment is to show that you can, in addition to influencing business, which is so important, and accelerating pipeline, that you can go out there and show a return on investment from attracting net new customers through a lead to revenue model, right? So that you can say, I can look in the whites of the eyes of our CFO and say, look, you give me another $100, I'm going to get you another 5,000, right? So invest that with me. So this first year has really been about putting that infrastructure in place to ensure that I can get the increased budget. Because I'm with you. I think the way marketing is influencing, or has, because the buying patterns have changed so much in terms of how people are buying, and marketing has such a huge role in that up front. What do they say? They're 80% the way through the buying cycle before they want to talk to a salesperson, which I believe to be true. Marketing has to have a greater influence on that. And in order to do that, we need budget to be able to make that happen. But for Avid, this first year has been about proving that out so that we can continue to increase our investment, so we don't have to make trade-offs. We can have it be incremental. And that's ultimately my goal.
So it's interesting. So I had Ann Lunas from Adobe on the
Yes,
show,
yes.
and she talked about when she first got to Adobe, she was like, "Oh my God, we're spending so much money on events." And then she went to these events, and then she saw what was happening at the events, and she realized, "Oh my gosh, we need to keep spending that much money on events."
Yes,
Um,
yeah.
and what's interesting about the measurement of events and why, it's such a tricky thing is that I imagine that if I go to, and I was looking at some of the videos on your website, if I'm at one of your major shows and I'm a customer, I'm coming in and I have questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to
Mm-hmm.
play with it. I want to look at the new gear. I want to see how I could do what I do better. I want to be with other professionals. So your community is there.
Right.
The question becomes, are there, could you find net new leads as you describe them at an event so that you could also have that same sort of math in place that
Mm.
you can so easily predict with digital?
Right, right. Yeah, I think that's a challenge. Our community is always there, which is why we need to be there, and we need to continue to connect with them. But we also, at Avid, the events we go to, we have over 500 customer meetings. One-on-one customer meetings, and many of them I attend. Maybe not 500 at IBC, but many, many. So I'm with you. I believe that we need to be there and we need to be connected. I think it is harder to show that those net new opportunities come from those events. But the wonderful thing I find about events is all the content. It's not just about the four walls of that event now.
Right.
It's about scaling that content outside of the four walls of the
Right.
event, and that's where the new business comes from.
Okay.
So it may not be the butts in the seats at the theater,
Right.
but it certainly is about taking that content, amplifying it from the event, and pulling people in through the digital aspects of the exposure of the content. And that is absolutely measurable to show a lead to revenue scenario.
Okay, so because I'm struggling with this statement, and I know a lot of I've heard a lot of CMOs. In fact, one just said it on the show.
Yep.
Is that don't do it if you can't measure it? Do you believe that?
I don't. I think there's certain. I do think that the average tenure of a CMO, I think these days is like 18 months or something.
It depends on which survey. If you look at Spencer Stewart's, they said it's about 36 months right now.
Yeah,
But
well,
it depends.
whatever.
Yeah.
I think you hear CMOs say that because they have to be able to show their return. And in order to get more money and to drive return, they have to be able to measure everything.
Right.
I look at it as the number one most important things that CMOs need to do today is, especially in a SaaS and a subscription world, is to ensure that your customers have an outstanding experience. And that is measured by retention and customers staying with you.
Yep.
And you need to understand from a marketing standpoint all the touch points that were there to make sure that those customers are renewing. But you can't always measure the direct correlation between customer renewing and the marketing experience, right? So
Right.
that's where it's gray, right? And I'm okay with that.
Right.
I think where we need to show return, again, in a SaaS and subscription model, is that we can go out and find those opportunities that sales isn't already working.
Right.
And that, I believe, does need to be highly measurable, and you need to show how you can do that so that you can scale new pipeline creation and not keep adding sales reps to do that, but to scale that through marketing. So that absolutely needs to be measured and recorded and managed very closely. But there's a certain aspect of the customer experience and influence that I think that's too strong of a statement to say don't do it if you can't measure it.
So it's interesting that you say that, because I've been trying to come up with, for my book, incredibly simplified metrics for 3 targets: employees, customers, and prospects.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like with customers, I'm not happy with NPS because there are issues there. It doesn't give you enough. It's some of the math behind the original idea was problematic, but it is a number. So if you could sort of look at, say, NPS plus, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
revenue maintained or increased, plus actual recommendations and some kind of percentage number, you would have a real strong sense of what true satisfaction looks like and loyalty looks like and the value of that.
Yep.
Do you track customer satisfaction from a metric standpoint? And if so, how do you do it?
We do, and I think I think we can do a much better job of that. The ultimate view of measurement in our world right now, especially as people are moving from perpetual to subscription, is that they continue to renew. They have options. Customers have options today. Even the big enterprises have options. They're not trapped. As much as companies would like to think, not Avid, but companies would like to think, we got them, they're with us, even if they move from perpetual to subscription. I don't believe that. I think customers have options, and it's our job collectively as an organization to make sure those renewal rates stay at the highest level. And that should really fuel every customer engagement that we have, is to make sure that they stay with us. So I agree with you. I think there's lots of, notions of different measurements, but at the end of the day, if a customer maintains being a customer with you, they see the value of what you're doing, they are seeing a great experience, and that that's the priority. Avid has more work to do in that area. There's no doubt about that. Every company does, but I think there's a road to that. There's a roadmap from an Avid perspective on making sure that we keep those renewal rates where we want them to be.
Interesting. And I imagine that's a testable thing too, that you can test various offers, programs, timing.
Correct. Promotions.
Even with your content,
Absolutely.
as
Yeah.
renewal.
That's right. Yeah. And we have a whole program that we've put together this year that really talks about, renewals and reinstatements and all of these things that are leveraging. We implemented a new 6 Sense as an ABM platform, so we can segment the customer base and, serve up specific promotions to specific customers. So, we're just starting that journey, but absolutely, I think that's a marketing principle, right? To make sure that you're focused on the renewal rate, especially as you move to a subscription model.
Very cool. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I'd love to talk more about customer retention for men. I know we can do acquisition, but let's talk about retention when we get back.
You've been listening to another great interview on Renegade Thinkers Unite with Drew Neiser. But the value doesn't end there. As a listener, you can download a free ebook from Drew, Renegade Thinkers, interviews with 11 trailblazing CMOs any business can learn from. Top marketing thought leaders and proven executives from Time Warner, American Express, and Chico's, and others. Get your free copy at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook. For listeners only at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook.
Okay, we're back for part 3 of my interview with Melissa Puls of Avid. And I just want folks to get a sense, if you went to avid.com and you looked at the videos, you would see the way editing equipment, when I started in this business, every single TV commercial was edited on an Avid machine. And this was a vast machine with multiple monitors. And this world has evolved tremendously. And, you know, as you said, you used to sort of buy equipment and buy the software that would make the equipment, and that was that. But now you're in this SaaS world. And so renewals become essential, because here's the deal. If you're an editor at a large studio, a production company, you need this stuff. It's not a question of do I, you know, this is not you need this to do your job. So let's talk about how you've approached renewals. I mean, you know everybody's name, you know how much you're spending, you know what the lifetime value of the customer is renewed. So if ever there was some math there, right, you know, so I can, given the profit of a renewal, you can figure out exactly how much you need to spend to keep them.
Yeah. And I think there is a science to it. I'm not convinced we have the science down yet here at Avid.
Okay. So work in progress.
It's a work in progress for sure. But yeah, so what we have is consistent outreach to our customers at different stages in the renewal process. So, you know, we have nurtures that we put in place within certain periods of time. We're serving up content to them that shows the value of our offerings and the new features, the new functions, what it is that we're doing, not just, you know, 30 days before they're ready to renew,
right,
but ongoing touch points to engage with them. You know, the other piece that's really important, we're just starting to scratch the surface on, and you see some of it with the videos, but it's the learning process. You know, giving them the tools through e-learning to make sure they're maximizing Avid to its fullest, and that's really important. And we're again, you know, this is a journey we're on, but we're starting to deliver a lot more tutorials and a lot more content that allows them to maximize our content. Also having Avid days where we invite our customers, we're out in the field and we invite our customers to you know, play with the products and do some training out in the field, which is really important. So, you know, it's really we look at this as like, it used to be like, you know, you go out and find a customer, they buy, and then you service them when they have problems.
right. Yeah.
Those days are long over. And I think you're absolutely right. There's a way to measure every step of that. The science will come into play as we get better with the data on this. Again, you know, the breadcrumbs of data being left behind with the buying journey, the beauty of marketing is to be able to scoop up all those breadcrumbs and use them as insights to serve up the right content at the right time, which we're, you know, starting with Avid, and we did a great job of that at Progress. So yeah, I think there's a science to it, but I think the number one most important thing is that you're consistently engaging with your customers in a way that they want to be engaged.
Right. It's interesting. For the listeners, you did a great interview with Kim Whitler, who was on the show recently. We'll just link to it in the show notes. If you want a description on how to build a sort of a strong demand generation engine, put it under the category of digital transformation. It's all in that article. So we won't have to cover that here. But
Great.
At the beginning of the show, I talked about whether or not there was a difference between B2B and B2C. I think we better cover that.
Yes,
so, let's talk about, because you have both, right? I mean,
right.
You have individual artists,
right.
you know, certainly in the music business, who are just starting out. And let's face it, a lot of kids are getting their start on YouTube. And so there's lots of different ways that individuals can touch Avid. So how do you bridge these two worlds in your work?
Yeah, it's a really interesting scenario, I think, that's kind of unique to Avid. As you said, you know, some of the largest media enterprises in the world use Avid for their end-to-end workflows. And then we have individual artists that are coming up and in the world that want to buy a single license, and they do that via our web store. So it's interesting that you have a scenario where you have an artist come in, they buy the web store, but then you have the largest of the largest having an enterprise selling model. So it's a unique challenge, I think, that we face. But the common denominator, there's two common denominators. One is all of our buyers are serious creatives. Okay, they're people that want to make their career in serious tools that help them differentiate themselves from everybody else. Okay, so that's one. The two is that they all, whether you're an enterprise buyer or you're an individual creative, you're a person. You're an individual.
What, really? I thought it
You
was a
get
target.
and we all have our own likes and our own dislikes, and we all have our own perspective on how it is that you want to buy. So I think some of the tactics or the strategies that we use for our B2C buyers, which are very personalized based on their behavior as an individual, can be applied also to our larger enterprise B2B type buyers. And the bottom line is not only, and I heard your blog about personas, which I found very, your podcast on personas, which I found very interesting, because I agree with a lot of what you said. I think kind of grouping a group of people as a persona is very overused, because they're not, I don't think it's about a persona. I think it's about an individual. And in today's marketing approach, again, there's all these breadcrumbs that have been left behind. And as long as you don't do it in a creepy way,
Right.
because we don't want to be creepy marketers,
Right.
the way you avoid doing it creepy is that you serve up valuable content that they want to actually look at based on what their behavior is. And marketers are becoming technologists, right, and data analysts and strategists in terms of that. So I think it's just becoming a blend between B2B and B2C, and Avid is a real use case of that, because we use a lot of the similar tactics as we move into this much more of a digital, content driven, personalized approach using technology to do that. We're finding ourselves using a lot of the same tactics and strategies to market to, whether it's our enterprise buyer or our creative buyers.
Interesting.
The messages are different. If you're an enterprise buyer, you're really concerned about security, and individual creatives care about security too, but they want to know it's reliable, that you can be secure. There was just the announcement with Disney and Microsoft and moving to the cloud, and the first workflows they're moving are the Avid workflows. So these big mega enterprises want to know that they can do that in a secure way. Maybe the individual artist doesn't care about that as much.
Right.
But the tactics and the way in which you go about marketing to them is about individual, not about persona.
So
Yeah.
let me stop you there, because there's
It's a controversial statement.
No, it's interesting. And so one of the points that I was making, and in my persona episode, was that, first of all, many of these personas are cliches of the job roles, and so
Right.
therefore
Right.
they're not that deep. I mean, I had Ian Howells from Sage Intacct on the show probably a year ago, and they do 50 interviews with what they call micro targets before they even start. So they know so much more. So if we're talking about deep dives where you really do know, that I get that there's some sense to that. But
Yep.
the bigger issue is that when a buying committee, and this is for enterprise, $1 million purchases, gets together, and I bet you have some of this where you have CFO, the head of technology, IT, security, particularly now that you're dealing with the cloud, everybody has an opinion. Now, if you present different stories to each of those people and they get together, it's like the blind man feeling the different sides of the elephant and not knowing what they're feeling. So the key here is the brand has to have a common idea that informs that. And that's the difference. So I do
Yeah.
think that in many ways, as I looked at your website, I mean, the landing page, there's powering greater creators.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that is the idea that,
That's the idea. And that we just very recently went through a what I call the refresh of our brand and what we stand for. And the Powering Greater Creators was the output of that. And as I mentioned, there's a common denominator: serious creators that want to make their career out of being, taking that creative energy, and even the IT people and all the bigwigs, if you will, at these large enterprises. They know that they need to enable greater creators,
right?
right? That's their job. That's what they're in it for. And they have their certain skill set to make sure that happens. Like, we have the greatest technology on the planet. So, we just recently went through that refresh of the brand so that we could have that common link across all of our audiences. And I totally agree with you. That's so important. And you'll see that more and more as our marketing goes forward. We have Powering Greater Creatives, and then we have our enterprise element of that and what that means to an enterprise. And we have our individual artist element and what that means to them. So it's kind of a hierarchy of messaging. You start with the Power Greater Creators, and then you have the enterprise thread of that. You have the individual creative thread of that. And then you go down deeper, and you're now at an individual level. And that's when you start to use the data to tell the story of what you need to serve up to those individuals.
Right, because what does powering greater creator mean to the independent DJ or the independent we'll just call them wedding videographer or something,
Yes,
right?
right.
Versus Disney.
Right. Which, I'll give an a good example of this is a gentleman by the name of Angus Emerson, who is one of the lead guys over Burnish Creative, which is a post editing firm out in LA. They do all the America's Got Talent and things like that. He's Australian, and he was in Australia, and he was producing videos using Media Composer, and he was like, man, I differentiated myself by using Media Composer from everybody else. And Burnish Creative, which is a large enterprise post, they have hundreds of licenses of Media Composer, saw his work. So now this is an enterprise that cares about being creative. They're seeing his work over in Australia. They recruited him in. Now he's in a corner office with a Hollywood sign. And I went in and I talked to him when I first started. And he's like, it's really because I was able, and this is where the Powering Greater Creatives, it was actually from one of my conversations with him and other customers, was he's like, you guys made it happen for me. Like, because of the tool that I used from Avid, I was able to stand out from everybody else that's just using basic tools. So, I'm not saying that as an Avid pitch. My point is that the connection, connection between the enterprise, which is the Burnish Creative, who wants to power greater creators, and Angus, who is creating in a powerful, unique way, the common thread there, there's a common thread there, but they're applying it in different ways.
So, in Renegade Thinking vernacular, we would call that a purpose-driven story statement.
Yes.
And what's wonderful about this one is that it really does show that here's a company that has a wide range of products that appeal to giant companies and individuals, and you have found language that is distinctive, because sort of the greater creator is kind of an interesting sort of rhyming thing. And that's part of this thing. It can't be flat. These purpose-driven story statements that could work internally as well as externally. And that gives the company a purpose in that this is what we do, folks. We're helping greater creators, right? This is how we go to a market. This is our reason for being. So any new feature we put in, any new thing that we provide, it's always about that. So the power of having a statement like this is that it can get everybody on the same page. Now, the question is, does that, and this is where I often see it break down, is when you say, hey, I got to do a demand generation campaign. and I got to get new customers in the door.
Yes.
So I better do features and functions.
Yeah.
And because I get how a feature and function story could be told under powering greater creators, but it's so much more interesting to just hear about the creators.
Right. Yeah. And I think Avid has an opportunity. We tend to be feature function product, like, you know, in go right down to the guts of here's what it is that we do. So you need to
Right.
be really excited about that. And we're actually raising our game in that area to be much more much more connected to the real world problems that our enterprises or individual creatives are facing, and have a connection by that, not necessarily the feature functions that we deliver. So we stood up a global demand center over the last year. That's a centralized demand center that has content and inbound marketers. And their challenge is to do what you just described, is to work with product marketing, understand the features and the functions and what the product does, and translate that into a messaging framework and a platform that can really connect to new buyers. And then, you know, you hit feature functions when you get lower down in the buying cycle, where you're really trying to, you know, capture them to convert it. But yeah, I think that's it's the challenge of marketers to be able to make that connection between the two.
Yep. So, and at the other, I mean, again, I do think it answers the question why,
Right.
which, you know, the what and how, you know, look, you have
Hmm.
the what, you got a long list of products, and greater creators, one could say, and the how is to be explored. And that's the
Yeah.
thing. You don't have to answer everything in every piece of marketing. You can let the website, and one of the things that's interesting is, as long as you allow me to drill down, if I'm an engineer, yeah, I do want to
Hmm.
see the speeds and feeds, but I still want to know and have a sense of that this is a company that cares about me, that understands me, that there are people like me somewhere in this vicinity, because I don't want to be this, oh, that's not me.
Mm. Yeah.
You know, these are my people. Okay, so I guess forward looking,
Hmm.
what would you say moving ahead is your biggest challenge?
Yeah, so I wanted to just circle back real quick. I thought you made a good point about, you know, the Powering Greater Creators also has an internal rallying cry as well, and I think tying that back to like what's next is that, you know, I'm working very closely with our head of HR, because I believe that Diana and I believe that there's a really strong connection between the external brand and our internal values. And, you know, the human capital and the marketing is just a complete collide, I believe, similar to B2B and B2C, right? They're kind of coming together. I think your internal values and your external brand and how the people internally think about that is so important. So, you know, we're approaching this, you know, kind of getting the message out there from the inside out, that we need to make sure our employees and our team members within the company identify themselves, relate to what it is we're communicating to our customers, and that they become that, and then that drives, or they are that, right? And then that tends to push the customer experience and connecting with the customers, and then that drives renewal. So, you know, it all is sort of connected, right? And it starts with how we think about ourselves as Team Avid, and then how that then connects with our customers to drive a really amazing customer experience. So that's what's next. You know, it's continuing to push on that notion of the customer experience, while we and leveraging the face-to-face events and the experiences we're giving our customers, while we're driving also to a you know, the B2B, B2C integration between those two things, and using the breadcrumbs of data that's left behind to attract new customers as well. And so, you know, it's a very exciting time, I think, to be a marketer. I don't think it's ever been more exciting, actually, to be a marketer than it is right now, and particularly as Avid, as we, you know, continue to make this transition.
Well, you, the audience might think that I paid you to say some of those things, because when we talk about renegade thinking, one of the things that we first say is that your first target is employees, your second target is customers, and your third target is prospects. Because if your employees don't believe the program, your customers never will, and if your customers don't believe that the idea, then your prospects never will. So getting the customer, the employee on board is key. It's funny, in research that we've done, while most CMOs will agree that that's really important, less than, I think 20% actually give more than a month or two to employee integration with a new brand campaign. But nonetheless, that's okay, as long as it's on the agenda. All right, well, we've had a wonderful conversation. I'm going to quickly summarize for the folks who somehow or other jumped ahead and missed some of that. But I think that some of the things that you mentioned early on in terms of how you approach this job are really worth talking about. One is just, we talked about how you have to build a team. We talked about figuring out very quickly, and this is sort of this whole world of setting expectations. You have to have some metrics that you agree on with the C-suite that will, if we achieve this, we're all happy. And so that's sort of a basic entry thing. What I love about this conversation is you heard tremendous passion for marketing itself and the role that marketing can play. We spent a lot of time talking about customers engagement, why that's so important. And then lastly, on employees, how can you get any better than that? So Melissa, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Drew. It's my pleasure.
And to all the listeners, this was a long episode, but I think there was so much there for you to gain. I hope you stayed with us all the way through, maybe stayed in the car to finish it, even though your commute is over. Anyway, if you enjoy this show, do me a favor, go to your favorite podcast channel, rate the show. We always appreciate the reviews. You know that you can send me an email at drew@renegade.com if you have any questions for follow-up for Melissa. And as always, until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.